بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين ولا عدوان إلا على الظالمين وصلوات الله وسلامه على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا. اللهم أعنا على ذكرك وشكرك وحسن عبادتك يا رب الكريم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Lesson I think 31 and we only have a few left now of academic year 2, and inshallah our aim is to finish the entire chapter of wiping over the socks and wiping over the imama and the splints and the bandage in this academic year, inshallah, hopefully with a little bit left for some questions and some kind of review. So I am not actually 100% sure where we finished, but I do think that the last thing that we mentioned was the evidences for why we should wipe over a splint as opposed to washing part of it and then doing tayammum for parts of it. I think this is basically what we got to. And I think the last thing that I basically mentioned is from page 247. 247 basically refers to 247 basically is referring to the statement, what if you have a wound which is basically uncovered? So maybe you've got like a bad cut which you can't even cover. Yeah? So I mean, I think it's straightforward. If you have some kind of like, major burn or something and you've got or whatever wound and you've got like a bandage over it, well, we said that you're just going to wipe that, and that's fine. That entire area gets wiped. And obviously the area has got to be the area of harm or the area of damage. But we put a scenario over, what if that entire arm is like burnt and you can't put a bandage on it, or it doesn't have a bandage? Then in that case, then we said, yeah, okay, that's understandable and you can make tayammum. Right, and this continues, ila hilliha. So, astaghfirullah, ila hilliha. I just fell for the biggest trick in the book. Ila halliha, until it gets cured, not until it becomes halal, which is what I just said. Ila halliha. Let me just read to you the Arabic. This is referring to page 3. وجبيرة لم تتجاوز قدر الحاجة ولو في أكبر إلى حلها إذا لبس ذلك بعد كمال الطهارة. So during major impurity, one can also wipe over a splint or a bandage that covers the minimum area necessary only until it is no longer needed. إلى حلها, until it's basically fixed. And all of the above is upon the condition that they are worn, meaning the imama, meaning the khimar, meaning the everything. All of this is talking about as long as the condition is there, that they are worn after the completion of ritual purification, after the completion of tahara. And that's a controversial statement, of course, which we've already disagreed with previously, and we're going to look at it again, inshallah, in detail. So, what does ila halliha with the fatha on the ha, okay? And what does this mean? Basically, as soon as the wound is fixed, then or healed or cured, then we're not allowed to wipe over that area, and that's straightforward. Okay, now as long as all of these rules previously talking about wiping days and times and concessions, whatever, is only all allowed if it has been put on, those 4 items have been put on after you have completed your purification. What are those 4 items? The khuf, the leather sock, the imama, which is the turban, the khimar, which is the headscarf, and the jabira, which is the bandage or the splint. Alright, so let's have a look at the let's look at what this actually means. Until purification has been completed. So let's give an example basically of what the text is trying to say. It's trying to say that if there's a person who needs to make ghusl, okay, he is in a state of junub, alright, he's sexually impure and he needs to make ghusl, right? So he's about to make ghusl, but what he does first is that he basically washes his feet, yeah? So he washes his feet. Why? So he can put his khufs on. So the question is that acceptable or not? This person basically, he's put his khufs on. I mean, I don't know how that would work. I'm just guessing that maybe he's in the shower, washes his feet, and then he puts his khufs on, and then maybe I guess he leans into the shower to wash the rest of his body or something. I don't know. If you use a bathtub, then that's possible to do that. Back in the day when we used to get it's not the same thing, but I do know what it means to be able to do an upper body wash. upper body wash is to basically not get into the bath and to wash the top part of your body standing outside the bath. Yes, we used to do that. You know when we used to do that? We used to do that when Mum used to do our haircuts. we would get the haircut, and then we would say, you know, at that age you don't like baths and stuff, so we'd get our haircut, and then you'd lean over, isn't it? And then they would put the shower, the flexible one, over their head. There might be a scenario, man's got to make a bath, basically washes his feet, and then he steps out the bath. Is that going to be acceptable? Is that going to be acceptable? The answer is that this is not acceptable because purification has not been completed. Now, I'll tell you what's interesting, okay? What's interesting is that the purification is not acceptable not because he washed his feet first. That's not the reason, okay? Because actually in ghusl, there's no order for things. So it's permissible to wash your feet first. Does that make sense, yeah? It is permissible to wash your feet first in ghusl. Now, we're going to come to this obviously probably in 5 years, but we're gonna obviously come to ghusl. But when it comes to ghusl basically means washing your entire body. Yes, with the niyyah of purification from major al-hadath al-akbar, from major ritual impurity. What's the conditions? The niyyah and to wet your whole body. The fact that you make wudu first, make istinja first, then make wudu, and then wash from your right hand side first, and your left hand, pour 3 times. All these are sunnah acts, sunnah acts, but they're not obligatory acts, okay? So therefore it is permissible for the actual process of ghusl just to wet your entire body. And if that's the case, then we ask a question, is there a specific order which is necessary? The answer is no. So meaning that a person, if he did wash his feet first and then the rest of his body, that's permissible. So we're asking, why is it not acceptable for a person to put on his khufs after he's washed his feet? The answer is because he hasn't actually completed the purification. It doesn't matter that he washed his feet first, that's fine. But he didn't wash the rest of his body, and so therefore he hasn't done a ghusl. Yeah? Does that make sense? Right, so okay. So another scenario, okay? Let's say now a person now just needs to make wudu. So he's just been to the toilet, he just needs to make wudu. So he's making wudu, and he's now nearly finished his wudu, and he washes his right foot, and as he's washes his right foot, he then puts it down, he dries it, and he puts his khuf on. And then he puts his khuf on, and then he puts his khuf on, and then he puts on his, and then he washes his left foot, and then he puts his left khuf on. What does the madhab say? What does the madhab say? The madhab says that this is not something which is not acceptable. Okay? Why is it not acceptable? Because tahara has not been completed. That's it, basically. Tahara has not been completed. Alright? And why do we say that tahara hasn't been completed? Because he's actually still got his left foot to wash. It's only when his left foot is washed does the person then he's actually completed the actual wudu, the actual purification. Does that make sense? So for that reason, then we can say that that is not something which is complete. And there's an evidence for this. Of course, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, فَإِنِّي أَدْخَلْتُهُمَا طَاهِرَتَيْن. Actually, I put in my feet were clean, purified when I put on my khufs. This is, of course, when they tried to take his khufs off, right? When they were about to pour water for him to wash his feet, ﷺ, and he basically stopped them and he said, I'm going to wipe over my khufs. When he stopped them, he said, no, I've put them on tahiratain, put them on whilst clean. So now they're going to say, the madhab's going to say, what does this statement mean? Putting them on tahiratain is an evidence which suggests that you can only put on the khufs after you've completed tahara. Yeah, that's basically what they're saying. Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, he said, no, actually, it is permissible for a person to, once he's washed his right foot, he can put on his khuf, and then once he washes his left foot, he can put his left foot, and it's fine. Because for him, this hadith does not mean that the Prophet ﷺ completed his wudu first and then put on the khufs, but rather he put the khufs on when his feet were clean, pure, clean. Alright? So is using a different kind of meaning, if you like, of it's almost like I said, it's almost like the Prophet ﷺ said that I put my khufs on and my feet were clean. And so therefore Ibn Taymiyyah is saying that therefore if a person washes his right foot, that's clean now, so you can put the khuf on. So there's the difference between the madhab and Ibn Taymiyyah. Okay, so anyway, as I said, in the madhab this would not be acceptable. You have to complete tahara. And how do you complete tahara? You have to wash right foot and then left foot. That's complete, isn't it? Now you can put on your khufs. What does Sheikh Al-Uthaymeen alayhi rahmatullah go with? I'll tell you what's really interesting. Most of the time you know that he's a big fan of Ibn Taymiyyah, as we all are actually, as in myself I am as well. But he himself didn't actually follow Ibn Taymiyyah this time. He actually says, to be honest, if we look at the hadith, it seems to support the madhab. إِذَا تَوَضَّأَ, okay, when a person makes wudu, then he wipes over his socks, meaning that it's suggesting that the wudu has to have been completed. So he's kind of really supporting the madhab, saying that yes, really we should only wipe over khufs that have been put on after wudu. Not like, as we just said, a person washes the right and then puts it on, and then washes the left and then puts it on. No. So he prefers the position of the madhab, which is the one that you've got. He does, however, add at the end, he says, but with respect to Ibn Taymiyyah and with respect to this issue and the khilaf that is there, which seems like a common sense one, so he does like the idea that Ibn Taymiyyah is saying, but it's clear that he thinks that the more correct position is the madhab. He says, if we did see a person who made wudu, and I tell you why this is important. I mean, people normally wouldn't have seen this in a Muslim country, but in the West we see this all the time. If you're at an office and you're making wudu, a lot of people wash one foot and another foot separately. By that I mean, they will put their foot in the sink, and then because they don't want, you can imagine, it's like damage control, right? So a person's put his foot in the sink and he takes it out. He's got two scenarios now. He's either now going to stand on his wet foot, or if he's, experienced campaigner, he's put some tissue down there and he's now standing on that tissue with a wet foot, and now he's going to put his other foot into the sink. In the end, he's going to be standing on two piles of tissue with two wet feet, right? Or he's going to say, you know what it is, from a PR point of view, I'd rather stand with only one naked foot than two naked feet. So what he might do is that when he brings his foot down from the sink, he actually still has a shoe and sock on the other foot, and therefore his only one foot which is uncovered is that one. He then dries it, he puts his sock on, he puts his shoe on, and then takes his sock and shoe off of the left one, and then he washes that. You know what I'm saying? That's become very popular in corporate kind of world, in office world and so on. So the question is that if you walked in upon a person and he was doing that, alright, and then later he then wiped over those socks later, and you're with him, alright, what has he done? He's done something which the madhab does not accept. The madhab will not accept the wiping of the sock over the socks of this person, because they'll say he didn't complete both feet first before he put both socks on. Ibn Taymiyyah, as we said, he said no problem, you don't need to do both, put on the sock after the right foot and then on the left foot afterwards is fine. Ibn Uthaymeen, Shaykh al-Uthaymeen, what did he say? He goes to support the madhab position. It's a safer position. I also agree, it's a safer position. But his point is, if you saw a person do that, we wouldn't tell him to take his sock off and start again. We wouldn't criticize him. We would say this is an issue of difference of opinion, and no problem, you carry on. That's what Shaykh al-Uthaymeen, he mentions right at the end. He goes that, we're not going to say to him, A'id salatak wa wudu, okay, and repeat your wudu, repeat your prayer for wiping on the thingy like that. He goes, but if a person hadn't done it, then we would instruct him, we would educate him. Does that make sense? Yeah, we would, before he would actually go ahead and do that. So this is all to do with the wiping of the khuf. Okay, what about the jabira, the splint? Okay, people are saying that you have to make wudu, or you have to have purification before you use the splint. Now that's weak. That's pure weak. I mean, think about it. What's the point of wiping over an injured area if you have to make wudu on it first? The whole point is lost. The whole reason you're wiping over the bandage, the whole reason you have a concession to wipe over a bandage is because you're not meant to get water on the area. You're not meant to get the area ruined. So anyway, so common sense doesn't work. But we shouldn't go to common sense first of all. Let's go to Sharia. Is there any reason? Is there any evidence that says that you must make wudu like there is in the khuf? Yeah, that's clear. The Prophet ﷺ said that once you make wudu, then you wipe over the socks. But is there any evidence for the splint and the bandage? Answer is no, there's no evidence. Nothing from Quran, nothing from Sunnah. Okay? And as Shaykh Uthaymeen says, he goes, secondly, he goes, come on, he goes, normally these things happen all of a sudden. You might have wudu, might not have wudu. Suddenly, something, you trip over, break your arm. We're going to now say, wait, just hold on. Before you put the plaster on, let me make wudu, and then I can put the plaster on. It's ridiculous. Okay, and that's the reason. So even though the madhab still says, no, you have to. The madhab does. Hanbali madhab says, no, you do have to make wudu before you put on the jabira. Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah said, absolutely no way. There is no condition. And there's no condition here at all. And that's Uthaymeen's position, and that's definitely our position as well. You do not have to make wudu first before you put on the bandage. As soon as you put the bandage on, you can wipe over it, no problem. So a question arises here, just to make sure that we're strong and feeling confident in our position. The reason that we're happy, very strong in saying that, is because we know that there's a clear difference between a khuf and a jabira. You see, the reason that the madhab is saying, you might say, well, hold on, why is the madhab saying it? Anyone know? Why is the madhab telling us to wipe over? Why is the madhab telling us that we have to have wudu first? It's easy, common sense. Why is the madhab telling us that we have to have wudu first before wipe over jabira?
Or just to be safe? Or?
No, even more obvious. From a sharia point of view, evidence point of view.
You have to be in that state before you put it.
Yeah, that's what it wants us to do. It wants us to be in a state of wudu. But why? Why is the Hanbali madhab telling us that we need to be in a state of wudu before we wipe over the splint?
To make people to make wudu at least, once a day before properly.
And then you cover up.
Okay, but why would it make you do that? Why would it enforce that upon you when they're not stupid, are they? They know that.
It might be dirty.
When someone's getting dressed, before they get dressed, they will force them to
So let's say you get dressed and you go outside, you fall down, break your arm. You're not going to say to a person, all right, listen, go and wipe over go make wudu first before you put the bandage on. Or let's say it's a big cut or burn or whatnot. What's the principle at play? Why is the madhab making you or conditioning upon you to make wudu first before you wipe over the jabira? Really simple. Keep it, the answer is really, really easy. Keep it really simple. The answer is because they're making qiyas. They're making an analogy on the khuf. Do you understand what I'm saying? They're saying, listen, do you accept that you have to make wudu on your feet before you put the khufs on? We say, yep, we accept that. They say, okay then. Therefore, everything now has to be based upon this. That's why they have said the whole thing. All of the 4 categories of wipeable things. So what are they? It's the khuf, it's the splint, the bandage, it's the turban, and it's the khimar. They're saying for all of these things, if you want to wipe on them, you have to have wudu first. So that's their evidence. And they say, we say, what's your evidence? They'll say the evidence is qiyas, because the only thing that we have a hadith for which makes us wipe is the khuf. And if the khuf is there basically, and we know that you have to make wudu, do you accept that? Yeah, we accept that. Then okay, then you should accept it for everything else. Our response to that is very clear. Our response is that there's actually a clear difference between a khuf and a bandage. I've already told you that 1, there's no direct evidence, and number 2, what's the point? But let's look at the actual differences now, from a technical point of view. Shaykh al-Uthaymeen, he says that he goes, a difference between wiping over a bandage, a jabira, and anything else. Okay, wiping over a jabira and any of the other things which are wiped over are a number of them. The first one, he goes that the jabira is something which is not specific to any limb. It can go anywhere. Whereas the khuf, only upon the feet. Okay? And the imama and the khimar is something which is only specific to the head. I just want to say for the time being that Shaykh Uthaymeen is playing along, and he's assuming that you do need to have wudu before you wipe over the turban and the headscarf as well. He's just playing along. He's just trying to show the difference between wiping over a bandage and wiping over everything else. Khuf, imama, khimar. He goes, first reason, jabira could go anywhere upon the body, but khuf is specific to the feet and everything else is specific to the head. Okay? And he makes an interesting point here. He makes a point here and says that if you understand this issue, if you understand that there's a difference between between khufs and anything else, between the khuf and if you understand there's difference between the splint, the bandage, and everything else, then you won't make a mistake in fatwa. Like who? He goes like who? Like the people who gave fatwa to women to make masah over their nails when they put nail polish on. You see, there are some that gave fatwa, okay? Look at this, yeah? So, let's just go back and look at the issue. We have socks, alright, fine. It's allowed to wipe over them. That's fine, alright. There's a hadith, many hadiths is very clear. Okay, fine. We have a hadith which say that you've got a turban on, and we've got thingy on, headscarf, and we've also got a hadith about the jabira, the splint, and so we now know that all of these things are permissible to wipe over. So then they said, if there are other things which are causing a barrier, these are all 4 barriers, aren't they? Yeah. So the turbans are barrier to the head, and so's that, and so's the feet, whatever. They said if there's any other areas of the body that there's a barrier, then we're gonna make qiyas. We're gonna make qiyas upon analogy upon that which is already wiped over, and therefore give fatwa. So they gave fatwa and allowed the woman to literally just wipe over her her nail polish, nails, basically, which is completely unacceptable, because there's no space for qiyas unless there is, when they're in the direct presence of a nas. When there's a direct text, which the Prophet ﷺ has made it very, very clear that the hands need to be washed when there is no harm, or there's no damage, or there's no pain, or no wound, then it's not possible for us to just create qiyas and to take away the direct nas. Well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says wash the hands, so it's not possible. Yeah.
When how did the Hanbalis respond to the hadith when the companion who was hurt his head and they forced him to do ghusl and then he died? So, I mean, there you have he has a bandage on, and the Prophet clearly said, why did he make him do that?
Yeah, so we covered, as we covered last week, but some people busy last week, isn't it, Nadif? This is why people had to be here, you see. As we covered last week, review last week's session, inshallah, then you'll find lots of stuff. Obviously, we said this hadith has some weakness in it, and there's some criticisms of the text itself, and then much more criticism of the statements that came afterwards as well. But anyway, we believe that it is permissible for us to wipe over the jabira, or make tayammum in cases of emergency anyway. So that's not actually relevant here. The main thing here is to understand that the Prophet ﷺ himself has made it very clear what is to be wiped over and what's not to be wiped over. And also, Shaykh Uthaymeen here, he goes that the Prophet ﷺ often also had difficulty. Yeah, a woman might say, I've got difficulty, I don't want to remove my nail polish. Well, the Prophet ﷺ at Tabuk, at the Battle of Tabuk, when he was, and it's narrated, the hadith you can find is on page 229, the hadith of Mughira ibn Shu'bah, and this is the hadith, which hadith is this, ya shabab? I've just turned. Yes, hadith Muslim. Okay, hadith in Muslim. Hadith number 274. In this entire story, the Prophet ﷺ, when it came to washing his hands, he had a cloak on. This happened to all of us, I'm sure. Okay, and he couldn't basically get his arms up to wash his arms properly. And so what he did is that he actually went underneath and lifted the entire shirt up, the cloak. So the cloak was basically hanging from his neck, and now his top part of his body is all naked, like, you know what I'm saying? And so therefore he put his hands underneath his shirt like that, and he washed. And the Shaykh Uthaymeen just makes the point that many times there have been some difficulties to wash something. We never saw the Prophet ﷺ say, oh, you know what, let me just wipe it. Okay, so it's very clear from the Nas, the direct text, as well as the practice of the Prophet ﷺ, that these are not options on the table just to make qiyas just like that. Okay, so there's a clear difference between wiping over the jabira and wiping over the rest of the other things. There's a difference. The second difference is that wiping over a splint is permissible in which states? All states. In Hadath al-Asghar and al-Akbar, meaning in minor ritual impurity and major ritual impurity. So a person doesn't, whereas in khufs, let me ask you a question. Is it permissible to wipe over your socks if you're in a state of janaba?
No.
Why not?
Because you need to make you're in the major state of impurity.
Correct. As simple as that. Yani, if you've got socks on and you're in a state of janaba, you have to take them off because you have to wash your entire body, right? But what about if you've got a splint or a bandage? That's what we covered last week, right? If you've got a splint or a bandage, it doesn't need to come off. That is the exception. So again, there's a difference. You see, this is what Shaykh Uthaymeen is trying to say. You can't make qiyas between something which has differences. You know? I mean, we're not doing qiyas now. Qiyas, analogy, or making analogy, is something which is a big part of Islamic kind of usul al-fiqh, has evidences and so on, principles. But it's not possible to make analogy between things which are different. You can only make analogy between things which are the same. So, for example, let me give you a good example. When I'm just off the top of my head, this might have some weakness in it, but cocaine, for example, is haram. There's no hadith, there's no ayah, there's nothing. Okay, but it's haram. Why is it haram? Because we made qiyas upon alcohol. All right, the alcohol is haram because it's muskir and it is khamar and it covers the mind and it makes you lose your head, etc., etc. And so that's the reason why alcohol is haram. So if we can find a product or anything which shares those exact same characteristics and it has the same kind of purpose, same kind of modus operandi, same kind of method, then we make that haram as well. We look at cocaine and we say it's a drug, it's not got any use, it's done like this, blah 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 blah. We make it haram based upon its negative effect upon the body and the way that it makes you lose your mind and think that you're super powerful, super great, super this, that. Fine. Now, let's imagine that we've got a chocolate bar that's made of some kind of real next level chocolate that it itself can give some kind of dizzy effect, and in some people, and in other people it doesn't. Or maybe let's say that in a person who is XYZ chromosome deficient, it will make them drunk, for example. But the rest of the people, it won't do anything. Okay? Or let's say that, let's say it has a significant difference, significant kind of unique characteristic, which is not the same as alcohol. Well, we cannot now make this chocolate bar haram, because when you're making qiyas from one thing to the other, the thing that you're making qiyas has got to be the same in all of its key principles and characteristics, in its awsaf, in the way that you're describing it. It's got to be the same. If it's not operating the same, if it's only working upon certain people, then we can't just make all the chocolate bars haram for everyone when it's working only upon one kind of person. Whereas cocaine will take everyone out, like alcohol takes everyone out. Yeah, that's not a very good example, but the point I'm trying to make is that qiyas, there is a fariq in when we study the principles of qiyas. If there's something which is clear difference between the two things, then we can't. That's why we cannot make qiyas between the jabira, the bandage, and the khuf, because first of all, as we just said, the hadith comes in the khuf. It's not a damage scenario, it's a normative scenario. You wash your feet, put them on. A jabira happens immediately. A jabira can go on and put on in, it can be wiped over in a bath, in a major impurity and minor impurity, whereas the khuf only in minor impurity, and so on. A third difference, okay, is that the wiping of a jabira has no time period. It's you can go on, if you're damaged for like 10 years, then you wipe for 10 years, and if you got a wound for 10 days, then you wipe for 10 days. Whereas it doesn't matter how far you're traveling as a traveler, you've only got 3 days and 3 nights. You have to take the socks off after that. So again, another clear, obvious difference between the two. And so when you have all these differences, it's not permissible to say the rules that apply to the khuf must apply to the bandage. We'll say, well, how can you do that? They'll say qiyas. We'll say you can't make qiyas because they're different. You can't make qiyas upon something which is different in principle. And then the Sheikh says that number 4, there's no condition to actually make wudu, even in principle, before you put on a bandage. Okay? And he goes also, in Sheikh's opinion, as he's already said, you don't need to have tahara either for the imama or for the khimar. Okay? And we said it might be a safe opinion to make wudu first, but actually there's no evidence for it. And as we said, or as what I said in the lessons a couple of weeks ago, I said I agree with that as well. That to wipe over your turban, or to wipe over your khimar, or to wipe over any of these, you do not need to have made wudu first. But the khuf, the socks, leather socks, all those socks, definitely so, because there's a text. Right, so now we move on to page 4, okay, which is a new section, new text, okay? This is interesting stuff. So in the Nas of Imam al-Hijawi, of Zad al-Mustaqni', Imam al-Hijawi alayhi rahmatullah, he says, page 4, he goes, ومن مسح في سفر ثم أقام أو عكس أو شك في ابتدائه فمسح مقيم وإن أحدث ثم سافر قبل مسحه فمسح مسافر. Translated, if one wipes while they were traveling and then becomes a resident, or wipes whilst they were resident and then becomes a traveller, or was unsure when or how he actually started, whether he wiped it here or whether he wiped it there, then he will wipe like a resident, meaning that his wiping will be for a time period of 24 hours, 1 day and 1 night. Okay? If one becomes ritually impure, meaning he breaks his wudu. Remember, whenever you read the statement, when someone becomes ritually impure, it just basically means he breaks his wudu. And if one breaks his wudu and then travels, before he actually wipes, his wiping period will continue like that of a traveller. Okay? Now this might not make sense now, but it'll make sense soon. It's very good. It's very clear. Very, very, very clear. Now, obviously, there's some differences of opinion here between the scholars, and let's look at that, inshallah. So the first point is that if a person wipes whilst they're traveling and then becomes a resident. So, what's happened here? I am in London, okay, and I wake up from my hotel in London, and I'm staying in London. I live in London, okay, and I'm now thinking, and I put my socks on, and I made wudu, and then I break my wudu, and then I make my wudu, and I wipe over my socks. I can, because I put my socks on, everything's fine. As it stands now, how long have I got to wipe? 24 hours, because I'm living in London, I'm hanging around, whatever. Now I suddenly go and make safar, okay? I now go and make safar, and I go all the way now to Manchester, okay? Which is 200 miles, it's a clear distance. I'm now journeying, okay? How long now should my time period now last when I am there? Now this is the point. The text says that if one wipes while they were traveling and then becomes resident. Actually, I've just described the second sentence. Beg your pardon, right? I've just described or wipes while they were resident and then becomes a traveller. Okay. So I've actually described the second sentence. Let me describe the first sentence. If one wipes while they were traveling and then becomes resident. So now imagine now that I put my socks on. That's fine. I've now gone to Manchester. I'm traveling. All right. And then whilst I am in Manchester, I then break my wudu and I wipe over my socks. Okay. And now I'm going back home to London. When I arrive back home in London on the same day, okay, how long now do I wipe for? I'm back home. I want you to remember that when I wiped over my socks, I was a traveller in Manchester, which gives me 3 days. Okay? But I've come back home. So what is the madhab saying? In all of these scenarios, the two scenarios that I explained, you will wipe only for 24 hours. Shaykh Uthaymeen says, okay, he goes that as for the one who comes back home, there's no problem there, and that's straightforward. Everyone's happy with that? Yeah, the first scenario. I'm wiping as a traveller, I come back home, then I am now restricted to my home time. Alright? If you think about this, it's like the prayer. If this is complicated for you to understand, think about it from a salah point of view, think about it from an aql point of view. Aql first. When we are wiping, it's a concession. Why do we want that concession? Because we're out of our home, isn't it? So you get that whole 3 days because you're on the road, you don't know where wudu is, you don't know where water is, blah, 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 blah. When you're at home, it makes sense that the concession should be less used. So the time is reduced and you're at home. So that's why it's absolute common sense for us to understand that if a person wipes whilst traveling and then comes home, he shouldn't enjoy 3 more days, but rather a day and a night, and that's it. If he was praying, if a person was away abroad, goes travel for the day, and whilst he's there, he doesn't pray his prayer, okay, his dhuhr, then he comes back home, we know that when he comes back home, does he pray qasr, which is the 2 rak'ah, or does he pray full? He prays full because he's at home. Alright? But if he had prayed whilst he was there and then stayed there, he would have continued praying qasr. Yep. So same principle. Yeah.
Just so you can clarify, he's been on the road for 2 days. And now he arrives home.
Okay, good.
So then basically he's got to now make wudu immediately, isn't it? Because his mass is over.
So let's say the person's traveling.
Or he's been doing for Mas for 2 days.
So let's say the person travelled, and he broke his wudu, and he wiped over his socks. He did masah. He wiped over his socks. From now, this wiping of over the socks, he has 3 days and 3 nights. 2 days have already gone. He hasn't taken them off. He's wiping all the time. Yep, for 2 days. Okay, then he comes home. All right, it's the same here. If this person comes home, what's the situation? He has 24 hours anyway.
From the moment he arrives home.
Correct. He has
So-
has a new status of being home anyway.
So the 24 hours for the person who's traveling then becomes resident. The 24 hours starts not when the breaking of the wudu.
So let me read to you what Shaykh Uthaymeen says. He explains that in exact detail. He goes, so من مسح في سفر ثم أقام فإنه يتم مسح مقيم إن بقي من المدة شيء وإن انتهت المدة خلع. Okay, so if someone has wiped during safar and then he comes home, then he will continue to wipe the time period of the resident if there is actually any time left. And if the time has finished, then he takes them off. He gives an example of that. He goes, there's a musafir, and he's on his way home, and then the time for prayer comes. And so he wipes over his, for masaha, so he wipes over his socks, and then he reaches home. He will now complete the time period for the wiping of someone who is at home. Because the wiping period is 3 days for the one who's musafir. But now his journey has finished. So just as it is impermissible for him to now make qasr as he's at home, because he's now reached home, likewise it is not permissible for him to carry on wiping for the time period of a musafir. He goes, فإن كان مضى على مسحه يوم وليلة ثم وصل بلده فإنه يخلع وإن مضى يومان خلع وإن مضى يوم بقي له ليلة. So in direct response to your question, okay, he says that if there was, he goes that if there was he goes that if this musafir, he reaches home and there was a day and a night left, okay, from his 3 days, he has to take off he cannot wipe on his socks. Does that make sense? Okay. And he goes that if there are 2 days left, وإن مضى يوما وإن مضى يوما. No, and if he has used 2 days, okay, if he has used 2 days, he has to take it off. And if only a day has gone by in his since he's come home from his journey, and he's used a day, then he will only use now. He will have a night remaining, another 12 hours basically remaining. Does that make sense? So basically, when he comes home, he let's say that for example he has used 2 days already, or used 2.5 days already, or used any time period already, which is more than the day and the night, okay, then he has to take his socks off immediately. But if the journey period was less than a day, then he comes home, he has the remainder of that day period to carry on wiping. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so that's exactly the time period for the mas is exactly when you break your wudu, when you start your thing.
The time period for the masah starts not when you break your wudu. The time period for the masah starts when you start your masah.
Okay, so you start your mas.
Yeah.
Because and if you're coming from traveller to resident,
yeah,
basically if you've done 2, now
you're done.
You're done.
Correct. If you've already travelled and you've been wiping for 2 days,
yeah,
on your way home, and you reach home and you want to make wudu, you can't wipe over your socks because 2 days have been used already, and you're at home now and you only have 1 day.
You have 0 time.
You have 0 time, exactly. And you would have, if you were to come home, and if the journey had taken just like 12 hours, and you arrived home,
Then you just treat it as you were home anyway. You just because you in a normal condition.
No, you wouldn't treat it as if you were home anyway. You would treat it as the time period for being at home, which is 24 hours. And because 12 hours has been used since you wiped, you have another 12 hours left. That's what Shaykh Uthaymeen is saying.
But that's exactly the same as saying, you treat it as if you were a resident.
No, because if you're treating it as if you were a resident, then you would start 24 hours from whilst you arrived at home.
No. You start when you're a resident at home. You start from when you did the mass.
Correct.
And so even when you
that of course is the ruling. The ruling is that as soon as you start from traveling and on your way home, as soon as you get home, okay, your ruling is using a time period of 24 hours. Yeah. Okay. So I hope that's inshallah clear. Now the opposite is the controversial part. Okay. The opposite is if a person now he wipes whilst they're a resident and then becomes a traveller. So you're at home now, all right, and you're so I live in Manchester. I'm at home, and I want to go to London. So as I'm about to leave, I break my wudu, and I say, "Oh well, I've got my socks on anyway, so I'm gonna wipe." So I wipe. Now I'm at home. The madhab has said if you're at home and you've wiped, 24 hours for you. Is that clear? And a lot of scholars said that. But there's a second narration from Imam Ahmed, who and this second narration actually has some strength, okay, and this is now page 250. He goes, 252, okay. So basically, I just want to give you a little bit of explanation of what Shaykh Uthaymeen says. He goes, if a person, let us give his example first. He goes, if there's a person who wipes for a day whilst he is muqim, and then he makes safar, he's only got basically 12 hours left. He can only carry on wiping for another 12 hours. Because he's already used 12 hours. Why? Because he's got the ruling of the resident. That's what Shaykh Uthaymeen is saying. Okay. He goes, why is that? He goes, because in this scenario of wiping, we're combining between something which is permissible and haram. The permissible is to wipe for 24 hours. The haram is to wipe for more than 24 hours if he is not a traveller. If he's not a resident. He goes that you're combining these two states. He goes, because you combine two states of permissibility and impermissibility, out of safety, you always go back and revert to the position of the home person. Okay? He goes that if a person, after 24 hours, there's doubt now. If he was to carry on wiping for another 24 hours, another 2 days, the question is that should he be wiping as a home? Should he be wiping he's in a state of doubt. Shaykh Uthaymeen goes that if you were to take your socks off and wash your feet, there will be no doubt whatsoever about your ibadah. He goes because of this combination of the resident and travelling state. So the Prophet ﷺ said, "Da' ma yaribuk ila ma la yaribuk," leave that which makes you doubt for that which is not doubtful. Okay, and that's hadith, of course, which is very authentic and correct. And so therefore, he goes, because of this doubt, the madhab has chosen 24 hours. Meaning chosen the position of you wipe as a resident. He goes, yet it is interesting to know that there is a second narration from Imam Ahmed himself that no, he will continue to wipe like the one who is traveling, because the reason has been found. Now that he's traveling. He needs to take concessions on travel. Why are we restricting this guy to the restrictions of of being at home when he should be enjoying the fact that he's traveling, okay, and so on, and so therefore, right. So Shaykh Imam Ahmed makes this point, and Shaykh Uthaymeen's happy because you can see that he himself, Shaykh Uthaymeen himself, he is. وهذه الرواية قيل إن أحمد رحمه الله رجع. He basically said that Shaykh Uthaymeen says is that it has been narrated, and the reference is Al-Insaf, okay, which is Mardawi's book. He said that Imam Ahmed later, even though this was a second narration, but actually he came back to this position, meaning this was his position, that a person should actually wipe like a musafir. So he doesn't need to worry. If he goes off on safar, it doesn't matter. Now Shaykh Uthaymeen makes an interesting point. He goes, if there was a person who's at home, breaks his wudu, wipes his socks, and then 24 hours passes, and then he travels, then what?
say again. So he's
at home,
he's broken his wudu.
breaking the wudu, made wudu, wiped over his socks, remained at home for 24 hours, and then set off on a journey. Time to pray. Makes his wudu. What should he do?
Now he's a traveller, so he can wipe.
He's broken his wudu and he's wiped and he's remained 24 hours now.
At home.
So well, according to the first narration is that no, he's got to make wudu. According to the second narration, he's okay. The first narration.
According to the first narration of Imam Ahmed,
he has to take off his socks and wash his feet.
That's fine. According to the second narration,
no problem. He's
wrong. Why is it wrong? What is the second narration of Imam Ahmed?
He said that basically
he wipes like a traveller.
If what?
If the reason is found.
Okay.
And the reason is travel.
Right, but there's something before that. Who wipes over the socks like a traveller? Who?
The muqim.
The muqim?
When he's then travelling.
Okay, travelling when? What I'm pushing you towards is that what I've just given you is a third example. It's a different example completely to the previous. How's it different to the one I just stated? Obvious, man. I made it very, very clear what was unique.
He's travelling immediately and one's delayed.
Correct. So, we're not immediately, but before the time period is finished.
Yeah.
So the second riwayah of Ahmed is referring to a person who basically wipes over his socks whilst he's still within the time period of the 24 hours at home and then leaves. He's still got time left. But the third example I just gave was a person who's a resident at home. Okay? He's a resident at home, and what he does is that he actually wipes over his socks and stays at home, and the time period now finishes. And he's still at home. And then he travels. The ruling on this is clear consensus between the scholars that he has to take his socks off. He's neither here nor there. He can't claim one status, he can't claim the other because his actual time period finished. There's another scenario as well, I think. Alright, go on.
Yeah, but I mean, that's going to be...
There's another scenario which is going to come up in the text in a minute.
But I mean, if he's counting as his muqim 24 hours, and he knows when 24 hours is going to end, so he's either going to leave at 23 hours.
And if he does, that's something else.
Yeah.
If he starts his journey at 23 hours, he's a musafir.
After 24 hours, he's got no wudu anyway.
Yes, he has.
After 24 hours, when
remember, wudu doesn't suddenly expire.
He hasn't broken his wudu.
He hasn't broken his wudu.
No.
Remember when we talk about all these time periods, all of these time. This is a really important point actually, because a lot of people kind of get mixed up with what actually does time period mean. A time period, so that when it expires, doesn't mean a person's broken his wudu. It means that if he was to make wudu, he can't wipe over his socks.
So you're telling me that person who then makes must at 23 hours.
Yep.
And then goes another 12 hours.
Absolutely. We discussed that. Remember that? We said that a couple of weeks ago. If there's a person who waits and waits and waits, and at 23 hours, he wipes over his socks and keeps his wudu for another 12 hours, absolutely fine. That's the whole point of the concession. You know what I'm saying? That's really important to know. So anyway, what we just said there basically is a completely new scenario now. There's a person there, he wipes over his socks, alright? And he stays at home and he completes his 24-hour period at home. He now cannot wipe over his socks. If he makes his wudu at home, he can't wipe over his socks. If he is on the road, he can't wipe over his socks. If he arrives at his destination, he can't wipe over his socks. Why? Because his time period is expired. But we will rule on this. So you might say, what's the class position? Alright? The class position so far is that we agree with the first statement. If one wipes whilst they are traveling and then becomes resident, then the time period is 24 hours. But if a person is at home and then wipes over his socks and then travels, then we will allow that person to wipe for the traveling period 3 days and 3 nights as the position of Imam Ahmed's second riwayah, second opinion. And to this effect, Shaykh Uthaymeen just makes it like a little cheeky point. He goes that if you are at home, Dhuhr prayer time starts, okay? And you don't pray Dhuhr. And then you leave and you go to London. Will you pray Qasr or Muqim? Qasr. You will pray reduced 2 rak'ah when you arrive in London. Okay? You will pray like a musafir, not a Muqim. Okay, so this is exactly the same as what we're talking about. Do you understand? Yes?
Mm-hmm.
A person, he's at home, he wipes over his socks. Why we, when he gets to Musafir, why are we making him pray like 4 rak'ah at home? He's going to pray 2 rak'ah, isn't he? So likewise, why are we making him wipe only for 24 hours when he's reached his destination abroad or whatever? We're going to allow him to have the concession of the travel. And that's the basic point here. And let's just quickly finish off this point, inshallah. There's another scenario which I'm going to come to in a second, and that is, imagine a person who wipes over his socks. A person who makes wudu and he doesn't even wipe over his socks.
What do you do? Wash his feet?
Yeah, just wash his feet, put his socks on, then just leaves. What about him?
Well, his wiping period even started yet.
His wiping period hasn't even started yet. Very good. I'm just saying that so that you know. He's absolutely safe. Yeah? He has, when he gets abroad, his wiping starts, and 3 days for him and nights, no problem.
Could drag this on for 5 days. We're having the same.
Of course. Yeah, a lot of people don't really understand that. They think that all the wiping periods are literally 24 hours or 3 days. It's not at all, of course. It depends upon how long a person's awake and how he's using it, isn't it? Yeah. And then finally, for this kind of small part, is if he unsure or he was unsure when or how he started. Okay, now this is common sense. If a person is not sure whether he is this or whether he was traveling or when he wiped, whatever, the madhab is saying that you just wipe like 24-hour period, the small period, the smaller rather than the larger, riskier period. And that's common sense. Okay. As for Shaykh Uthaymeen, he says that no, if a person starts off from home and travels, he remains wiping like a traveler. It doesn't matter. And I follow that opinion as well. That's the top position of this class. Actually, the top position of this class is that it doesn't matter whether he's unsure or not. If he's on his way home, then we're gonna make him wipe like he's at home anyway. But if he's on the way out, I don't care whether he wiped before or later, I'm gonna make him wipe like a traveler. Because he's on the way out to travel. And then the final point, okay, if one becomes ritually impure and then travels before he actually wipes, his wiping period will continue like that of a traveler. I just mentioned that right now, didn't I? Okay, this is a person who's at home and then he puts his socks on, he does not wipe, and then he reaches abroad, then he wipes, then he's now got thing. I'll tell you what's interesting about this point. Remember before when we were having the debate about whether the time period starts when? The time period for wiping starts when you break wudu, or the time period starts when you wipe your sock. Yes? And we went through all the opinions. Now what I want to show you is this, okay? What does the madhab say in the first sentence? Wiping over footwear is permissible for a time period of 24 hours and 72 hours for a traveller, starting from the moment that one becomes ritually impure. That's the position of the madhab. And what did we say at the beginning? We said we disagree. We said the class position and the position of a number of the scholars is that time period starts from when you first wipe. And what Shaykh Uthaymeen says, he goes, what's fascinating is that they've contradicted themselves in the same chapter, because here, right, what have they said? They've said that if this person, he leaves home, okay, and he does not wipe, his wiping starts from when?
His first wipe.
Exactly. Okay, ثم وإن أحدث ثم سافر قبل مسحه فمسح مسافر. He goes that if one becomes ritually impure and then travels before he actually wipes, okay, his wiping period will continue like that of a traveler. I.e., there's an indication that the most important point is the actual wiping. This can be argued, by the way. I just want to say that he can be argued, right? The Hanbalis could fight back if they wanted to. But the point is that we believe that the time period is connected to the wiping and not the becoming impure anyway. All right. So I just want to say that this was a little. Actually, if I'm going to be honest, this is a little bit different to what we said. Yeah, we said the person hasn't broken wudu, but it doesn't matter. Let's imagine, just to make it clear, I'm in Manchester. I put on my socks, and I now leave and I'm in wudu, and I leave for Turkey. When I get to Turkey, I can now wipe for 3 days from the second I wipe. It actually doesn't matter if I've broken my wudu or not. It doesn't matter. But now let's take another scenario. I'm at home here in Manchester I've done wudu. Before I leave, I break my wudu. I go to the toilet, but I don't make wudu. I don't wipe. And now I go to Turkey, and then I make my wudu and I start my wiping. My wiping period starts there. So just as an advice to you, if you do break your wudu, and there's no reason to be in wudu in your journey, and you need to extend your time period for whatever reason, you might have a reason, then just delay your making of your wudu. That's a little traveler's top tip. Traveler's tip, brother. You lot telling me tips like when you're stuck in, you got a 2-pin plug. I was with Kamal Maki the other day and he goes, Yani, I'll give you a traveler's tip. If you've got, yani, you know, they've got American plugs, isn't it? Yeah? And most of the places have got 3-pin plugs and they're stuck. So he goes, I'll give you this big tip. He goes, when you can't charge your iPhone, then stick it into the bathroom, yani, shaver socket. And I'm thinking like, wow, what an amazing tip. So anyway, got to hate on Kamal Maki. Any opportunity I get, there's war out there. Just wait for the new release. The new release. There's some amazing exclusive photos I've got to release, yeah. So that's about it, guys. I think we'll call it at that one. That was quite a long session, I think. No, it's okay. 55 minutes. It was alright. Alhamdulillah. But we did 6 pages, which is good. So yeah. I wanted to just thank everyone. I wanted to thank, of course, the Malaysians. We had an excellent session in LP. 2 sessions, mashallah, over there. It was brilliant. Fest was amazing, mashallah, tabarakallah. Looking forward to that again, inshallah. And Kuwait this week. And then next week, inshallah, we're back in Cheadle, back in home ground. So those people who are watching this, make sure you're back at 8 o'clock for the final 3 lessons. I'm not sure, there might be a 4th as well. 28th is what they said, huh? Or 29th, Shaz? Ramadan. If it's 29th, then we'll get the 28th Wednesday in. Or no, it might be Tarawih.
No, definitely that week off.
Okay, it looks like that goes definitely that week off. So it looks like 21st of June will be our last one. Anyway, inshallah, we've got 3 lessons left, and I'm pretty sure we can complete this chapter in those 3 lessons. Jazakumullahu khair. Subhanakallahumma bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant wa astaghfiruka Allahumma wa atubu ilayk. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.